Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow, muddy step back in time to medieval Scotland. Picture this, grey skies stretch endlessly above you, the rain has been falling for what feels like weeks, and you've just arrived in the Scottish Highlands around the year 1282. You're cold, you're drenched, your shoes are... wait, no, you don't have shoes. And you're about to discover why surviving even a single day here takes more grit than you probably packed. The ground beneath your feet is soft and soggy, a mix of mud, moss, and patches of stubborn grass that struggle to cling to the rocky earth. Sheep scatter across the hillside, their thick wool soaked and sagging under the weight of the rain, bleeding like they've just seen your travel itinerary and are less than impressed. The air carries a sharp, earthy smell, peat smoke from distant fires, mixed with the faint but unmistakable odor of damp wool and animal dung. Welcome to your new home, or at least the place you'll be trying to endure. A crooked wooden sign, half buried in the bog, marks the name of the nearest village. You squint at it, but can't make out the letters, assuming they're letters at all. They might be Gaelic, Old Scots, or simply the result of a bored local child whittling away with a dull knife. Literacy isn't exactly a local specialty here. After all, only a small fraction of people can read or write. For the most part, words are a luxury, and survival is the main event. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge into the village, each footstep sinking deep into the thick, swampy earth. The mud slurps around your ankles, reminding you with every step that the ground here isn't going to give you any firm footing. There's no paved road, no welcoming pathway, just a clump of damp huts made from wattle and daub, perched precariously on the edge of a peat bog. Chickens scatter at your approach, clucking nervously, while a small child stares at you with wide, suspicious eyes. Their face is smeared with something you hope is just dirt, because imagining anything else is frankly disturbing. You duck into the first hut you see, your assigned lodging, or so they said. The door is a low, splintered wooden slab that creaks loudly as you push it open. You stoop and shuffle inside, only to be hit with a thick wall of smoke and a smell suspiciously close to fermented goat. There's a fire pit blazing in the middle, flames flickering up toward a ceiling made of rough-hewn beams and thatch, but there's no chimney. The smoke just kind of hangs out, settling in your lungs like a bad roommate who never pays rent. You cough and blink through the tears streaming down your face, thinking about stepping back outside. But then you remember, it's raining. It always is. So you grit your teeth and settle in. Welcome home. The roof leaks in precisely 3 places, each drip forming small puddles on the earthen floor. The floor is dirt, by the way. Not packed well at all, more like uneven soil with stray straw bits. There's a wooden bench along one wall, its surface rough and cold. Draped over it is something that once might have been a blanket but is now a sodden, itchy rag. As you take stock of your new lodgings, you realize something else. There's no bathroom. You don't even ask where it is, because the glint in your host's eye says the answer won't be pretty. In truth, the whole village shares a single toilet spot, a shallow ditch at the edge of the woods. They call it the place. You will quickly learn to call it despair. You sit down on the bench and try to make sense of your surroundings. Over the crackling fire and the intermittent drips from the leaky roof, you hear the sounds of life outside. Sheep bleating, more sheep, someone shouting in rapid Gaelic, and the unmistakable thud of something heavy hitting the mud. Probably a pig, or maybe an unlucky neighbor who tripped on uneven ground. The locals are kind enough, but their eyes betray a mix of curiosity and suspicion, wariness usually reserved for English tax collectors or particularly bold wolves. An elderly man approaches and offers you something in a wooden bowl. You smile and accept, although you're not quite sure what to expect. It turns out to be porridge. Cold porridge. With bits. You don't ask what the bits are. Historians still argue whether this era in Scotland was a time of rustic peace or brutal chaos. But standing here in this hut, with the wind whistling through every crack in the wall and the smell of damp wool and peat filling your nostrils, you can tell it's leaning heavily toward chaos. You wrap yourself in the itchy wool tunic they handed you, one that's clearly been worn by many before, and lie back on the wooden bench. There's no mattress, no pillow, no concept of softness here. Just hardwood, damp straw, and resignation. As night falls, the wind howls through the cracks in the hut like an off-key lullaby. You hear distant howls, wolves, you hope, though it might just be the wind playing tricks. Honestly, who can tell in this place? And just as you're almost starting to drift off, a rooster crows. At night. For no discernible reason. Welcome to Scotland. Morning comes too early and far too loudly. You're not sure you actually slept. Between the smoke curling in from the peat fire still smoldering outside, the damp chill seeping through the cracks in the wooden walls, and the fact that something small and furry, probably a mouse, definitely uninvited, tried to share your bench around 3 a.m., you might have just closed your eyes and hoped for unconsciousness. But now the village is stirring, and you're about to be introduced to the daily grind, medieval Scottish edition. Spoiler alert, it's not pretty, and you probably won't survive it without complaining at least once. The air outside your hut is cold enough to bite, but the kind of bite that leaves you gasping and reconsidering every life choice that brought you here. You take one cautious step into the mud and immediately feel it creep between your toes. You're not even mad anymore. You've accepted that dry feet are a myth invented by monks to keep morale up. The cold seeps past your thin shoes, chills your socks, and settles somewhere deep in your bones. You're reminded quickly that the weather here is less pleasant Scottish drizzle and more wet blanket from the sky that never leaves. Around you, the village is already hard at work, if you can call it that. There's a man hacking away at frozen soil with what looks like a wooden spade, swearing softly in Gaelic. The words are indecipherable, but the tone is clear. This is not fun. Nearby, a group of women trudge toward the river with baskets strapped to their backs. You guess it's laundry day, though it might just as well be fishing for all you know. Everyone's bundled in layers of rough wool and misery, and no one smiles much. They haven't had the luxury of doing that for a long time. Your host, a wiry man with 3 teeth that glint when he grins and an enthusiasm that borders on madness, cheerfully informs you that it's time to turn the sod. You nod like that means something to you, but it doesn't. It turns out it means you'll be helping with rudimentary farming on land so poor it should probably sue the sky for neglect. The soil here is boggy and acidic, and the so-called plow you're handed looks like it was carved out by a child with a blunt knife and a death wish. 2 reluctant oxen are harnessed to this contraption, which you're told to help guide. You're scare the oxen into moving forward using a stick. You're not told how exactly, but it quickly becomes apparent the oxen are less than cooperative, treating your stick like an annoying mosquito rather than a motivator. Your arms ache within minutes, your hands blister, and you discover muscles you didn't know existed. There's no break, no water bottle, no kindly coworker offering a granola bar or even a sympathetic glance. Just endless wet earth and the knowledge that if you don't help now, there may not be enough oats come winter. No oats means starvation. starvation means death. Motivation achieved. As you fumble with the harness, an older woman with cheeks chapped by the cold and wind chuckles at your expense. "Soft hands," she says, smirking like it's the funniest thing in the world. You laugh, a little too hard, to cover your weeping soul. She's seen this all before, newcomers showing up with clean fingernails and fresh boots, thinking they can handle the land. She's also the same woman who knows the river's best fishing spots and which weeds can be eaten if you're desperate. You try to imagine what it's like to have lived here all your life, to know the land and the weather like an old friend, even if that friend is a relentless bully. Midday arrives with all the ceremony of a wet sock. The villagers gather for the meal, which is exactly what you feared: cold barley cakes, hard as rocks and twice as flavorless, paired with whatever foraged greens were still clinging to life after a particularly brutal winter. There's some dried fish too, stiff, chewy, and vaguely apologetic. The taste reminds you of the times you tried eating jerky in your youth, only sadder. No honey or butter to soften the blow. Just survival on a plate. One thing you notice immediately is how physically small everyone seems. Malnutrition's been working overtime here for generations. It's not uncommon for adults to be under 5 feet tall, with stooped backs, leathery skin cracked by one too many harsh winters, and a kind of permanent tiredness in their eyes. You glance at your reflection in a muddy puddle nearby and sigh. You still look too clean. Too hopeful. That won't last long. You silently wonder how many years of this grind it takes to lose that shine. Historians still argue whether peasants in medieval Scotland had time for leisure, but out here, it's pretty clear. Leisure is what happens when the rain briefly stops and you don't fall face first into the bog. For a brief moment this afternoon, that miracle occurs. The sky clears, the mud dries just enough to avoid sucking your boots off, and the village collectively exhales. Then, as if on cue, a cow decides to make a break for freedom. What follows is 15 minutes of absolute chaos as half the village tries to corner this surprisingly nimble beast using a rope, 3 sticks, and a lot of yelling. The cow clearly has other plans and dashes through the mud with enviable speed and agility. You join in, waving your stick and shouting nonsensical commands. The village women scold the men for their lack of control. The men blame the cow for being clever. Eventually, the cow wins, slipping through a narrow gap and disappearing behind a thicket. The village grumbles but knows better than to chase further. You retire to your hut with sore legs, muddy boots, and a new appreciation for domesticated livestock. Never trust a cow to sit still, you think, especially one that's been cooped up too long. As the day ends, smoke rises lazily from the chimneys, curling into the darkening sky. There's a communal sense of fatigue hanging in the air, a kind of unity born of mutual exhaustion and shared struggle. You sit with your host family near the fire, warmth spreading slowly through your chilled body. A child, curious and mischievous, pokes you gently with a stick. You smile weakly. That's probably friendship, or at least a truce. You're handed a wooden cup filled with something that smells like regret and fermented apples. Cider? Technically. Possibly. You take a cautious sip, and the throat burn surprises you, but your worries fade just a little. The warmth inside you now isn't just from the fire. It's the feeling of belonging to something, even if that something is hard and unforgiving. You ask what day it is. Nobody knows. The concept of a calendar hasn't really made its way to this patch of soggy paradise. Instead, the villagers live by the rhythm of the seasons. Lambing, planting, harvesting, surviving. Rinse and repeat. If anything, Your arrival was the most exciting event the village has had since the traveling friar lost a sandal in the creek. And as you drift to sleep once more, this time under slightly warmer straw, you hear the soft sound of someone playing a bone flute outside. Probably to scare off wolves. Or ghosts. Or just because that's what passes for a lullaby here. Either way, it's weirdly calming, and you let it carry you into the uneasy sleep of the weary. You wake up before sunrise, not because you're eager, but because a rooster has planted itself somewhere near your head and is screaming like it's auditioning for a bardic metal band. You'd ask someone to remove it, but you're pretty sure it's also breakfast. By now, your body has begun to ache in unfamiliar places. Knees, shoulders, neck, even your ears feel tired, somehow. The fire has long since died down, and your breath clouds in the frigid air. You wonder, as you stretch your sore limbs, how anyone survived past 30 in this climate. Answer: they mostly didn't. Today, you're headed beyond the village. You're told it's market day, or rather, market hour, because the closest thing to trade here is a handful of folks meeting at a rocky clearing with some sheep, turnips, and a few jars of questionable ointments. You're invited along, partly because your new friends are showing you off like a very tall, very confused novelty. The walk to the market takes about 2 hours, though time is slippery when you're trudging through mist-shrouded glens and mud that tries to eat your shoes. Your guide, a grandmother with a limp and excellent posture, informs you, cheerfully, that this path was once used by cattle thieves. She gestures at a hillside and says, "We used to run the stolen cows up there so the lairds wouldn't see." You laugh until you realize she isn't joking. At the market, you're immediately hit by a smell you can only describe as goat forward. It's a mixture of wool, cheese, sweat, and the vague panic of animals who sense they might be dinner. Still, there's energy here. Children dart between stalls, men argue over the price of salted herring, and a toothless woman hawks a miraculous salve that cures gout, boils, and unhappy marriages. You're offered a treat, some sort of pastry filled with mashed peas and herbs. It tastes like regret wrapped in moss, but you chew dutifully. Hospitality matters. You overhear one man boasting that he recently paid his rent in wool and a very agreeable pig. The bartering system here is alive and well, and often entirely subjective. 1 turnip might cost 2 eggs, or 3, or a song, if the buyer's lucky and the seller's lonely. Historians still argue whether medieval markets were sites of vibrant cultural exchange or just frantic bartering hubs for basic survival. Standing here, you'd wager it's both. Yes, people swap goods, but they also swap stories, warnings, gossip, and the occasional recipe for turnip stew that won't make you cry. On the way back, your group pauses at a small stone shrine nestled into a tree line. A few coins rest beneath a carved figure that looks suspiciously like a local deity, or maybe just someone's great-uncle. Your guide murmurs a quick blessing. You do too, just in case. The line between Christianity and older, earthier beliefs is thin here. Saints and spirits coexist like mismatched roommates. You hear one man refer to St. Cuthbert as the good ghost with rain powers. You don't ask for clarification. By afternoon, you're back in the village and tasked with helping to thatch a neighbor's roof. Which sounds easy until you're actually balancing on slippery beams, stuffing bundles of reeds into place, and trying not to fall into the pig pen below. The pigs seem amused. You ask how long a thatched roof lasts. The answer? Until it doesn't. Very helpful. One fringe detail you learn: there's a whole superstition around roofing material. Some claim that if you weave a strand of red thread into the thatch, it keeps the devil from dancing on your house during storms. You look at your muddy fingers and briefly consider it. Dinner is a thick oat broth with pieces of leek and what may or may not be a bone from yesterday's chicken. It's hot, and that's good enough. You're slowly developing a fondness for the local spice blend: salt, smoke, and desperation. That evening, you're invited to sit by a neighboring hearth. The patriarch, a solemn man with a voice like gravel and eyes like a tired eagle, begins to tell stories. Some true, some maybe true, and some that involve giants, selkies, and talking ravens. The line between history and folklore is, like everything else here, soggy and blurred. One tale sticks with you. A story about a man who tried to outwit a local tax collector by pretending to be dead. He even lay in a coffin for a week. It almost worked until he sneezed. Now he's known as the corpse who owed rent. They laugh for 5 full minutes. As the fire dies down, you realize something odd. For all the mud, cold, and grueling labor, there's a warmth to these people. A rough kindness. They don't have much, but they share what they do. Even their insults feel oddly affectionate. Earlier, someone called you a sheep-brained twigman and offered you a seat by the fire. Before bed, you're handed a rough woven blanket that smells like lanolin and ash. It's scratchy but warm. You curl up beside the hearth, listening to the wind outside, the distant bleat of a sheep, and the soft snoring of a man who just claimed he once outran a witch. You fall asleep thinking, life here is brutal, yes, but it's also full of stories. Morning greets you with the sensation of something damp nudging your foot. You crack open an eye to find a small goat investigating your toes with more curiosity than you're comfortable with. No one else in the room seems to find this unusual. The goat is, apparently, part of the household. You stretch, shake off the lingering chill, and do your best to stand without alarming the livestock. A nearby boy hands you a bowl of what looks like porridge but has the texture of wet gravel. You smile, nod, and pretend you don't miss cereal. You eat it anyway because hunger is persuasive. Today, you're helping with what they call clearing stone, which is exactly what it sounds like: walking out to a field and hauling massive, stubborn rocks from the soil so they can make space to grow something, probably barley or oats, if the land is feeling generous. The Scottish soil, you quickly learn, is not known for generosity. Every time you think you've unearthed the last rock, another one winks up from the ground like it's saying, "Surprise, you missed me." The people here joke that the rocks multiply overnight, like mischievous underground rabbits. One local swears that if you leave a rock near the edge of a field, 2 will be waiting in the morning. Historians, unsurprisingly, still argue whether this belief was metaphor or just the weary hallucinations of underfed farmers. As you dig and haul, your shoulders ache and your hands blister. And here's the kicker: you're helping prepare land that may not even belong to the family using it. Much of medieval Scotland was locked in a feudal web, where land ownership and usage were murky and power was wielded by local lords, bishops, or even absentee barons who hadn't stepped foot on the soil in decades. So while you're sweating through your tunic, a man you'll never meet is theoretically collecting the profit. And if he decides your rent should double next year, well, good luck. Complaining isn't really a thing here. The only grievance system is muttering darkly into your soup. You overhear a quiet conversation. Someone's been accused of poaching a deer from the local laird's forest. That's not just frowned upon. It's a death sentence, or at least mutilation. Not for stealing the food, mind you, but for trespassing on aristocratic privilege. Commoners can't even legally kill rabbits on noble land. Imagine starving to death beside a plump rabbit and being forbidden to touch it. That's the sort of brutal logic you're dealing with. The fringe tidbit you learned today? There's an old folk belief that if you speak kindly to the stones as you move them, the land will be more fertile. So for an hour, you're whispering sweet nothings to granite slabs while your spine screams for mercy. You're not sure it's working, but the farmer's wife says the oat yields improved last year. You don't argue. You've seen her wield a pitchfork. By midday, the clouds have rolled in, as if summoned by your misery. Rain begins, horizontal of course, and the earth turns slick beneath your feet. You slip, land squarely in the mud, and are helped up by a 6-year-old girl who calls you graceful as a legless goose. You take your soggy self back toward the croft, where the hearth is glowing faintly. The peat smoke clings to everything, clothes, hair, soul, but it's warm. You dry your hands near the fire, watching a woman spin wool into thread with a spindle that looks unchanged since Roman times. It's mesmerizing. The thread twists and pulls like magic, and the rhythmic movement feels almost hypnotic. One old man tells you spinning is how they pass stories along. If the hands are busy, the mind is freer to remember. You nod, filing away the phrase for later. Wool holds memory. Later, you're invited to join the group making repairs to the boundary wall. It's a dry stone construction, no mortar, just clever stacking. You admire the craftsmanship until someone hands you a rock and gestures at a gap. You slot it in. It immediately falls out. Someone mutters something in Gaelic that you're pretty sure is not a compliment. The walls aren't just fences. They're survival. They keep animals in and others out. A good wall might mean your sheep don't wander off or become snacks for wolves, or worse, neighbors. In fact, some of the fiercest fights between villages aren't about religion or politics, but sheep and where they wandered. There's also a deep respect for the land here, even when it's miserable and thankless. You help collect kelp from the shore, yes, seaweed, which they'll burn and use to enrich the soil. It smells like old soup and sea monsters, but it works. Apparently, some coastal folk even eat it. You try a bit. It's chewy. Regret returns. That evening, someone sings a song in a language you don't understand. The melody is haunting and beautiful, and the fire seems to flicker in time with it. You ask what the song's about. The answer, a man who drowned, but only a little. You're not sure what that means, but you accept it. You sleep that night wrapped in a damp cloak, your muscles trembling, your fingers raw, but your ears still echoing with music, your heart oddly full. You've seen the cruelty of the land, the weight of unyielding earth, but also the resilience of the people. They toil. They whisper to stones. They stack walls that last for generations. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. You wake to coughing. Not your own, but the harsh, rhythmic hack of the old man who sleeps near the hearth. It's a sound you've heard for days now, but this morning it's deeper, wet, rattling, final. No one rushes to his side. Instead, the others simply glance over and then go about their routine. You realize something that chills you more than the frost on the window frame. This kind of slow, creeping death is normal here. It isn't met with panic or pity. It's simply what happens. The man may have lung rot, what they might call consumption, or maybe just years of peat smoke soaking into his chest like mold in old bread. Either way, he's fading and no doctor is coming. Because there are no doctors. Not for you, not for anyone here. In medieval Scotland, unless you lived in a monastery town or were important enough to have a personal physician, and even those were more herbologist than healer, medicine was a mix of herbal guesswork and whispered prayers. Your options for care included boiling nettle leaves, wrapping cuts in moss, and applying honey to wounds, because someone, somewhere, swore it worked. And sometimes it did work. Honey, oddly enough, has antibacterial properties, though no one here knows why. They just know it stings a bit and seems to help. You sit beside a woman grinding what looks like bark into powder with a stone pestle. She tells you it's willow, and, centuries from now, someone will realize it contains salicin, the stuff that becomes aspirin. But there's no such comfort for the old man. By afternoon, he's gone quiet. They don't speak of it. There's no funeral procession, no carved marker. They'll likely bury him near the hill, wrap him in cloth, maybe say a few words in Gaelic you won't understand. And then life will move on because it has to. You help carry his body to a shallow grave dug with more effort than you expected. The ground is frozen, stubborn. Everyone takes turns. No tears. Just shovels and breath visible in the cold. His daughter places a small carved figure, a sort of pagan talisman, on his chest before they cover him. To keep him warm, she says. You don't ask questions. This is where things get complicated. See, medieval Scotland wasn't a neat place when it came to religion. Yes, Christianity was the dominant faith, and the church wielded enormous power. But older beliefs, the ones rooted in the land, the sky, the trees, never fully went away. So, while the local priest might condemn charms and folk rituals as sinful, people still whispered to wells and left offerings at standing stones when no one was looking. Historians still argue whether this was resistance or simple habit, but one thing's clear. Belief here was layered like peat, each age resting atop the last. You're never quite sure if you're in the presence of saints or spirits. That evening, you're shown something strange. A woman beckons you to a small hut near the woods. Inside is a boy, maybe 9 or 10, lying pale on a straw mat. His legs are bound with tight cords. His mother explains that he has the shaking, a sickness of the spirit, they say. Others would call it epilepsy. Their cure? A mix of prayers, chants, and binding his limbs until the devil flees. You're horrified, but you say nothing, because what else do they have? There are no hospitals, no ambulances, just tradition, pain, and hope. Later, someone offers to show you the Leech Book, a collection of remedies passed down for generations. It's more charm than science. You skim entries like, to cure fever, wrap a hare's foot in cloth and bury it beneath the sickbed. Or, boil frogs with sage and drink the broth by moonlight. You don't ask for seconds. Still, it's not all grim. The healer woman, sort of the village's unofficial doctor, midwife, and therapist rolled into one, has an impressive knowledge of plants. She shows you wild garlic for infection, yarrow for wounds, and elderflower to reduce fever. Some of it makes sense. Some of it smells like feet. But there's a logic in her gaze, sharp and skeptical. She tells you about a time she helped birth twins using nothing but a knife, hot water, and prayer. Both babies lived. She says it like she's talking about bread. No big deal. You believe her. You spend the night in her hut. It's quiet, aside from the creak of wood and distant howls, wolves, probably, or drunken men. There's a shelf of bones, dried herbs, and strange symbols carved into the wall. You trace one with your finger. She tells you it's for protection. Against what, you ask? She smiles. Against anything that walks upright but forgets to be kind. Noted. The next morning, you return to the croft, your head swirling with thoughts. You've seen people face death with dignity, cure sickness with roots and prayers, and survive despite every odds stacked against them. And still they laugh. A boy throws a snowball at your face. You pretend to chase him. He screams with joy. And the old man by the fire is already a memory. The days are short, and the nights are long. That's just how it is in the Scottish Highlands, especially during the dead of winter. You wake before the sun even thinks about rising, and the air bites at your cheeks like a hungry animal. Breakfast is yesterday's oatcakes and cold water, if you're lucky. You spend the morning helping the family patch their sod roof. It's always leaking, always sagging. The walls weep moisture. Your feet never really dry. You're starting to think the biggest luxury in medieval Scotland isn't meat or gold, it's warmth. And privacy? Forget it. Everyone sleeps in the same space, from toddlers to toothless elders. You're beginning to identify people by the smell of their boots. Still, you're glad for the company. Because out here, isolation isn't just lonely, it's dangerous. Villages are scattered and thin, separated by hills, lochs, and ancient forests. You want to go visit the neighboring hamlet? Better bring a sword and a backup sword. Or a large, intimidating cousin. Traveling even 5 miles can take hours. The paths are barely there, just dirt trampled by cattle hooves and heavy boots. And those woods? They're not enchanted like in fairy tales. They're just cold, dark, and full of things that want to eat you. Wolves, boars, and on bad days, humans. You and a boy named Aegon are sent to deliver a sack of dried fish to another croft. He's maybe 12 but already walks like someone who's seen too much. He carries a small dagger, and he tells you not to make eye contact with any lone travelers. Bandits, he says, casually. Or worse, taxmen. You assume that's a joke. He doesn't laugh. Halfway through your trek, you pass the remains of a burnt-out cottage. Just a skeleton of blackened wood now. Aegon says it used to belong to a woman who didn't pay her tithes. The local lord made an example of her. She screamed for a while, he adds, shrugging, but she owed. This is your first real glimpse at the feudal system in action. Technically, no one here owns land. The land owns them. It all belongs to a laird or clan chief who owes loyalty and soldiers to someone above him. In return, peasants get to live on the land if they work it, pay rents, and don't cause trouble. You don't get a bill in the mail, of course. Your tax is whatever the laird demands. Grain, sheep, wool, fish, sometimes your son to fight in his skirmishes. And there are a lot of skirmishes. Historians still argue whether this system was held together by loyalty or fear. Probably both. You know this much. Nobody says no to the laird. Not unless they want their house to look like that charred ruin back there. After the delivery, you're invited to stay the night. The family is kind, though visibly poor. Their child is ill, feverish, barely conscious. They've tried their remedies, broth, charms, and even pressing a warm stone against her chest. It's not working. The mother whispers a prayer in Gaelic, fingers tight around her necklace, while her husband silently sharpens an axe by the fire. You wonder if it's for chopping wood or something else. The next morning, the girl is gone. Her parents don't speak of it. No one does. You quietly help bury her in a grave marked only with a line of stones. You count 6 others nearby. All children. Aegon says, that's why we don't name them too early. You don't know what to say to that. So you say nothing. On the way back, you stop to rest beside an old cairn, a mound of stones rising from the earth like a frozen wave. Aegon warns you not to sleep near it. Bad spirits live in those, he mutters. Old ones. Before Christ came. You feel a chill not from the wind. These superstitions run deep. People may go to church on Sunday, but they still leave milk out for fairies and knock on wood before a journey. And sometimes, even you begin to wonder, Like when you hear the low moaning through the glen at night and no one can find the source. Or when the sheep suddenly bolt with no visible threat. One of the old men tells you the wind carries voices from the past. You laugh nervously. He doesn't. That evening, you return to your original croft. They're relieved to see you. Someone was attacked on the trail yesterday, not far from where you were walking. No one knows who did it, but the man's fingers were cut off. A warning, or maybe just a trophy. You sit near the fire, trying to thaw the cold from your bones. The woman beside you, the healer from before, rubs salve on a child's cracked feet. She hums a low tune, no lyrics, just sound. You find yourself humming along. And then someone opens the door. A messenger, covered in mud. He speaks in rushed bursts of Gaelic and English. Your host's face tightens. The laird is summoning all able-bodied men and older boys. Another clan is stirring trouble on the border. Maybe this will be a full raid. Maybe just a show of force. Either way, they're going. You feel the weight in the room shift. The older men nod grimly. The young ones pretend to be excited, but their eyes say otherwise. Dagon grips his dagger. He's small, but he's old enough. And you? You're not sure if you count. But that doesn't matter. When the laird calls, you don't decline. That night, you lie awake beside the fire, heart pounding. Outside, the wind howls against the thatch. You think of the cairn, the girl, the ex, the burnt cottage, and you wonder how anything ever survives in this world. Then someone snores loudly beside you, and it's so absurdly normal that you almost laugh. Almost. When you wake, it's still dark, but this time, the silence feels different. Heavy. Like something is watching. You sit up slowly, your blanket falling to the floor. Around you, the others are rising too. No one says much. They're already dressing, wrapping their woolen cloaks tight, adjusting belts, sharpening knives. There's a rhythm to it, like they've done this before. Because they have. You step outside into the frozen mud. The laird's steward has arrived with a small entourage, horses steaming from their nostrils, hooves squelching. He reads off a list. Your name is on it. So is Aegonus. He smiles grimly at you and fastens his belt a little tighter. You're handed a worn leather sling and a small pouch of stones. Not exactly Excalibur. The steward says it's all they can spare. Steel is rare, and mostly saved for those expected to swing it. The rest of you? You're the noise, the numbers. The ones meant to be seen from afar. The journey to the laird's hall takes hours. You pass through bogs that suck at your ankles and ridges that cut the wind like a blade. Along the way, other groups join. Boys with farm tools. Old men with crooked spears. One man carries a sharpened hoe and looks like he's already writing his death song. When you finally arrive, the laird's hall looms like a wooden fortress, thick timbers, high stone foundations, a smell of smoke and sweat and blood. You're ushered inside for preparations. That sounds much more pleasant than what it actually means. The laird stands at the head of the room. He's not what you expect. No flowing robes. No polished armor. Just a weathered face and a stare like carved granite. He doesn't yell. He doesn't have to. Everyone listens when he speaks. Even the dogs go quiet. He explains the situation. A neighboring clan is encroaching again, cutting trees in disputed lands, letting their sheep graze where they shouldn't. It might be nothing. It might be the start of something big. Either way, they have to show strength, presence, resolve. Historians still argue whether these constant border raids were driven by necessity, tradition, or just boredom. You're starting to suspect it's a little of all three. You're told not to speak to the enemy unless instructed. You're told not to run. You're told that if someone near you dies, take their weapon. There's no ceremony, no speeches, just a nod, and then they start handing out salted meat and hardened bread. Before bed, an old warrior, scar down his face, one eye long gone, teaches you how to hold your sling properly. You practice in the courtyard. Your first shot nearly hits a chicken. Your second bounces off your own foot. He sighs, then chuckles. You'll distract them at least. That night, the hall floor is crowded with sleeping bodies. Snores rise like a chorus of exhausted pigs. Egon lies next to you, eyes open, staring at the rafters. You think they'll kill us? He asks. You don't answer, because maybe they will. Dawn is gray and wet. You march out in a staggered column, flanked by the real warriors, those with chainmail and proper swords. They're not many, but they look confident. They've done this. You cling to the hope that they know what they're doing. The land you cross is eerily quiet. No birds, no wind, just the squelch of feet and the clink of steel. Everyone's breath curls into the sky like little ghosts. Midway through the day, you come across a ruined watchtower. Just stones now, half collapsed. The laird pauses here, holding up a hand. Scouts return with grim expressions. The enemy is close. You're told to stay put while the laird and his core fighters go ahead to negotiate. You sit on a damp log beside Aegon, chewing dried venison. Every few minutes, you glance toward the hill where the laird disappeared. Then a horn blows. Everyone tenses. It's not a call to attack, but it's not good either. 15 minutes later, the laird returns. His sword is out. His knuckles are red. He speaks only one word, prepare. That's it. Now comes the part you feared and strangely prepared for. You move behind a low ridge and wait. The real fighters line up at the front, shields ready, axes sharp. You're behind them, next to a man with one eye and a sling made from an old bootlace. Suddenly you hear it. Not a shout, something worse. A deep, echoing roar. War cries in Gaelic. The clash of metal. Then figures appear across the field, charging toward you. Mud flies. Shields thud. Arrows whistle overhead. You sling a stone. It flies wide. You try again. This time, it actually hits something. A helmet, maybe. You feel a flash of bizarre pride. Then Aegon screams. Is it? Not badly, an arrow grazed his arm. But there's blood, and he falls back, panicked. You drag him behind the ridge. He's crying more from fear than pain. You look up and see chaos. The line is breaking. The enemy is pushing forward. One of your own goes down, stabbed in the gut. Another flees, only to be tackled by a warrior from behind. Then something unexpected happens. A horn sounds, again, different this time. Both sides pause. The laird raises a hand, and the enemy's leader approaches. They speak. You can't hear what they say, but you catch the tone. Tired, disgusted. Then they part. Just like that, it's over. Apparently, they agreed on a line. A tree or a stream, or maybe just a rock. You're not told. You don't care. You're just glad to be alive. As you limp back toward the hall, Aegon leaning on you, you overhear someone mutter, "Could have all been settled with ale and a dice game." No one laughs. Back at the village, you're not celebrated. You're not even noticed. You're just another tired face in the mud. You help Aegon into his mother's house and sit beside the fire, staring into the orange glow. You think about the laird, about the enemy, about how quickly everything spun out of control, and how fast it ended. Historians still debate whether these skirmishes ever really resolved anything or simply kept everyone in a constant loop of fear and revenge. You lie down beside the hearth, the smell of smoke and blood still clinging to your tunic. Outside, the chickens cluck softly. Somewhere in the distance, someone plays a low, mournful tune on a wooden flute. You close your eyes, and for the first time in days, you sleep. You wake to rain. Not the gentle kind that soaks the earth with care, but the sort that slices sideways, driven by a wind with something to prove. The thatch above your head leaks in 3 places. One drop hits your forehead like a cold insult. You groan, roll over, and pull the blanket tighter. But there's no hiding from today. Word has spread. The churchman is coming. Not the soft kind from the abbeys either. This is a bishop's emissary sent to check on the spiritual health of your clan, which usually means 2 things: bad sermons and worse taxes. You dress quickly, not because you're eager, but because if you're late, the steward might shave your head for it. Outside, villagers shuffle toward the makeshift chapel, really just a small wooden building that smells like mold and sheep. The priest is already there, wiping his nose with a sleeve and muttering Latin like he's trying to summon something. You slide onto a damp bench between Egan, now bandaged, and an old woman who smells vaguely of onions. The emissary arrives on horseback, cloaked in rich wool and flanked by 2 armed men. One of them wears a surcoat bearing the bishop's sigil, a silver cross over a thorn tree. Very subtle. The emissary begins speaking. His Latin is better than the priest's, though not by much. He warns of hell, of sin, of women who whisper in the woods, of men who drink before sunset. You try not to yawn. Then comes the interesting part. He starts asking questions. Who here has paid their tithe? Who has confessed this month? Who speaks with the old healer woman beyond the ridge? Everyone goes still, because of course you know who he means. Her name is Tava, and she's been mixing salves and charms since your father was a boy. She sets bones better than the laird's physician and claims to speak with crows. She also once cursed a man's cows to produce only sour milk. You're pretty sure that one was real. Such practices are heresy, the emissary says, voice like flint. Any caught seeking her services shall face penance, or worse. The old woman beside you mutters, good luck curing the pox with prayer, then. Historians still argue whether the church's crackdown on folk healers was purely theological or partly economic. After all, the church couldn't tax nettle tea. After the service, you try to slip away, but the steward catches your arm. You're on hearth duty today, he says. And don't burn the bread again. Hearth duty is just as glamorous as it sounds. Cleaning soot, hauling firewood, and pretending not to eat the crusty ends of loaves while no one's watching. You're assigned to the laird's hall, where the bishop's man has decided to stay the night. You scrub the ash out of a corner while they feast. The emissary eats slowly, his fingers thick with grease. He drones on about corruption in the lowlands, about French wine, about relics that cry blood. The laird doesn't say much, though his eyes stay sharp. Then, out of nowhere, the emissary announces a new tithe. 2 more hens per household, to aid in the rebuilding of a monastery torched by heretics in England. The laird raises an eyebrow. England, he says. We've no cause with English heretics. The emissary smiles. God does. You can practically feel the room bristle. Hens are life here, eggs barter to. 2 per household is no small ask. Still, no one openly protests. That's not how this works. Disagreement is like wind in the chimney, noisy, pointless, and eventually silenced. Later, While stoking the hall's central fire, you overhear the emissary asking about Tava again. "She's old," the laird says, "and half-blind. She's no threat." "She is unlicensed," the emissary replies. "If she continues to practice, she will be tried. Or burned." You freeze. Burned? You thought that sort of thing only happened in legends. But no, Scotland had its own fire-happy streak. Between the 16th and 18th centuries, thousands were accused of witchcraft. And while the peak is still centuries away in your timeline, the seeds are already here, planted by fear, watered by ambition. You leave the fire untended and sneak away. The next morning, you find Tava sitting by her peat fire, brewing something that smells like pine and sorrow. She chuckles when she sees you. "So the bishop's hounds are sniffing, eh?" You nod. "Let them. I'll be dead before they ever find my bones." You don't want to imagine her gone. Not just because she healed your sister's fever last spring, but because she's one of the few who seems to know what she's doing. She reaches into a pouch and hands you something. An amulet, carved from bone, wrapped with a strand of red wool. "For luck," she says. And silence. That night you dream of fire, and chanting, and chickens squawking into the void. When you wake, the air smells like rain again. You can hear the church bell ringing, summoning the villagers for one last audience with the emissary. He'll leave by noon. Before he does, though, there's a final surprise. He's leaving behind a scroll of names. Those expected to contribute extra goods, grain, cloth, tools, for special penance. Your name is there. So is Aegonus. So is Tava's. You glance up the ridge toward her house. The fire in her chimney has gone out. You trudge through muddy paths toward the laird's hall, the chill of dawn creeping into your bones like a slow, unwelcome visitor. The air hangs thick with dampness, and your boots sink slightly into the soft earth, each step pulling at your weary legs. It's market day, that buzz of life that usually brings a brief respite from the endless grind, but today feels heavier, as if the clouds themselves carry a silent warning. You pull your cloak tighter, the rough wool scratching against your skin, and scan the horizon, where the gray sky presses down on the village like a damp blanket. The village is stirring to life. Chickens cluck nervously, darting through the mud in search of scattered grain, while dogs paw restlessly at the earth, their breath forming tiny clouds in the cold air. You see children rubbing sleep from their eyes, their faces pale and drawn, more from unease than the chill. Something lingers in the air. Maybe it's the recent visit from the bishop's emissary, whose presence has unsettled everyone, though no one quite dares say so aloud. Arriving at the market square, you notice the usual buzz of bartering is subdued, the lively chatter replaced by low murmurs and cautious glances. Peat smoke curls lazily from cooking fires and mingles with the scent of damp wool and freshly churned earth, creating an earthy perfume that somehow feels both comforting and oppressive. Your eyes catch the blacksmith, hammering away at a horseshoe, his face set like stone, his movements sharp but tense. Nearby, the miller argues with a merchant over the price of barley. Their voices are low but tight with frustration, their breaths visible in the cold morning air. The bishop's emissary may have left, but his shadow lingers over the village like a dark cloud. The new tithes, the additional burdens imposed by the church, are heavy on everyone's minds. 2 hens, extra grain, and the dreaded scroll of names demanding special penance weigh on your thoughts. It's one thing to hand over a few eggs or a handful of barley. It's another to part with the last of your woolen cloth, your precious tools, or even a favored knife. You can almost hear the unspoken question that haunts the market. Who will be next to face the church's suspicion? You pause beside a small stand where an elderly woman sells dried herbs and roots. Her hands are weathered like old leather, and she mutters prayers under her breath, casting wary glances toward the town square as if expecting the emissary to return at any moment. Leaning in close, she whispers to you, voice trembling slightly, "They say the bishop's men will come back soon. To search homes. To root out those who consort with old magic." You feel a shiver, not from the cold. Your fingers brush the small amulet tucked safely in your pocket, warm against your skin like a secret shield. In these parts of Scotland, folk remedies and whispered spells are as much a part of daily life as bread and ale. The healer's poultices, the charms woven from wild herbs, and the soft incantations murmured under breath have soothed wounds and eased fevers for generations. But now, these traditions stand threatened, condemned as heresy by those who wield power from distant cathedrals. The local healer isn't just a figure of folklore, she's your lifeline. The thought of losing her to a church trial, or worse, sends a cold fear deeper than any winter wind. You overhear a young mother quietly telling her child that the church insists all healing must come from prayer alone, not from plants or poultices. The child looks unconvinced, eyes wide and skeptical, and honestly, so are you. You remember the healer's soft hands, the scent of thyme and rosemary in her hut, the gentle way she treated even the most stubborn ailments. Across the square, a rare sight draws your attention, a traveling storyteller. A small crowd gathers around him, faces lit with curiosity as he spins tales of lost kingdoms and ancient kings, his voice soothing yet carrying hints of the brutal past. You find yourself drawn in, almost forgetting the weight pressing on your shoulders. His words float in the cold air like a gentle spell, transporting you to times when magic and myth danced just beneath the surface of reality. The storyteller mentions a curious legend about the red thistle, a symbol said to protect Scots from dark magic and ill fortune. You wonder if Tava's amulet, warm and smooth in your pocket, might be connected somehow, woven with strands of that same ancient folk wisdom. Historians still argue whether these tales were purely invented for comfort or whether they hold fragments of forgotten truths whispered from generation to generation. As the market winds down, the sun dipping lower and casting long shadows across the square, you catch sight of the laird speaking quietly with his steward. Their conversation is low and serious, punctuated by wary glances toward the village church, where the bishop's men are said to be preparing for yet another inspection. The laird's face is tight with concern, a reminder that even those who wield power feel the pressure of the church's ever-watchful eye. You realize again that life in medieval Scotland is a delicate balancing act, a slow, often exhausting dance between survival, belief, and the ever-looming presence of authority that views your traditions as threats to be extinguished. Every whispered charm, every herbal remedy, every quiet act of defiance carries a risk, but also a stubborn hope. The chill deepens as the sun slips behind the hills, painting the sky in muted shades of pink and gray. You turn away from the market and make your way home, the warmth of the amulet a small comfort against the growing cold. The village settles into a cautious quiet, but you know that beneath the surface, the pulse of old beliefs and the stirrings of new fears will carry on into the night. And so you walk, boots heavy with mud, heart heavy with the weight of stories, prayers, and unspoken fears, ready to face whatever tomorrow may bring. Section 10. You step back inside your humble dwelling, the worn wooden door creaking shut behind you with a soft, familiar groan. The sudden quiet inside feels heavy, yet strangely comforting compared to the unpredictable wildness outside. The air here is thick with a blend of peat smoke curling from the hearth, damp wool hanging from a rafter, and the faint, lingering scent of yesterday's stew, now cooling in its heavy iron pot. The flickering candlelight plays gently against the rough stone walls, casting moving shadows that make the small room feel alive, almost like a quiet refuge from the relentless cold and hardship waiting just beyond the threshold. The chill tonight seems to have settled deeper, as if it has seeped through the cracks in the walls and floors and nestled itself right into your bones. You feel the cold press against your skin, a reminder of the brutal conditions that define life here in medieval Scotland. This isn't just an inconvenience, but a daily, living fact, one that shapes your very existence. Yet, as you shuffle toward the hearth and settle close to the flames, a quiet resilience begins to wrap around you. The fire's warm glow offers more than heat. It's a small beacon of hope in the otherwise unyielding darkness. Your hands instinctively reach for a small wooden bowl sitting near the fire. It's filled with thick, grainy porridge, the staple that greets you morning and night. Oats, barley, root vegetables, and occasionally salted fish make up the bulk of your diet. You know meat is a rare luxury, reserved mostly for feast days or the laird's own table, leaving you to rely on the humble gifts of the land. There's a rumor you've heard whispered among the villagers, that some folks high up in the highlands survive on little else but watery gruel and whatever wild plants or roots they can find. It sounds bleak, but somehow the monotony of these meals carries its own kind of comfort, a rhythm passed down through generations, grounding you in the continuity of life. The dull thud of the wooden spoon against the bowl creates a slow, steady beat, a tiny anchor in a sea of uncertainty. It's oddly soothing, almost meditative. In this simple act, you find a small peace amid the daily grind. The food itself is nothing to write home about, but it fuels you, keeps you moving forward. You nibble slowly, savoring the warmth and the small promise that this, at least, will sustain you through another night. Your thoughts drift, as they often do in these quiet moments, to the curious folk remedies that pepper your daily existence. You recall the odd practice of using stale bread soaked in buttermilk to treat cuts and bruises. It sounds strange, almost amusing, but folk wisdom is a powerful thing, especially when the village healer is away, or worse, suspected of dark arts. You'd much rather trust the cold, simple science of buttermilk and bread than the distant edicts of a bishop or the ever-watchful eye of your laird, who governs more with fear than kindness. Wrapping a worn cloak tighter around your shoulders, you let the day's worries ease just a little. Outside, the wind howls softly, a haunting lullaby carrying whispers of the distant sea and the promise of another long, cold night. The sounds are both unsettling and familiar, like a restless spirit that drifts over the hills, unseen but always present. You wonder if the shepherds tending their flocks in the moonlight feel the same tug at their souls, the pull of isolation, the unending rhythm of work, the fragile hope that tomorrow might bring relief. Historians still argue whether the legendary Scottish resilience comes primarily from the brutal landscape itself, the harshness of its rulers, or a stubborn blend of both. Perhaps the relentless mountains and biting winds shaped a people just as much as the heavy hand of authority. Either way, the endurance you witness around you is remarkable, a quiet strength built on centuries of hardship. Your eyes grow heavy as you remember the children playing in the village square earlier that day. Their laughter was a fragile thread woven into the broader tapestry of hardship, a brief, bright spark in the otherwise gray fabric of daily life. Even amid the brutality, life finds a way to persist. Sometimes it's quiet, almost hidden. Other times it bursts forth with humor and hope. You hold on to that, letting the memory of their joy soften the edges of your tired mind. Outside, the stars blink faintly behind a veil of clouds, their cold light distant yet oddly comforting. It feels as if they silently nod their approval to the quiet endurance of those who call this rugged land home. The sheep tenders, the weavers, the cooks, the children, and the countless others who persist through hardship with a stubborn heart. The warmth from the hearth wraps around you, and the sounds of the village settle into a soft hush. It's a gentle reminder that, despite everything, you are not alone. You are part of a long, unbroken chain of lives lived in this harsh but beautiful place. As your breath slows and your eyelids grow heavier, you let the weight of the day drift away. Tomorrow's trials are still waiting, but for now, there is this quiet moment, soft, steady, and strangely comforting. Here, in the heart of medieval Scotland, you find a fragile peace in the fire's glow and the enduring rhythms of life. You wake slowly, the pale morning light filtering through the small, shuttered window, casting soft, hesitant beams across your simple, roughly plastered room. The chill in the air clings stubbornly, the night's cold has not yet loosened its grip. You pull your threadbare woolen blanket tighter around your shoulders, grateful for even that modest layer of warmth. The peat fire in the hearth smolders faintly, its embers sighing for more breath to bring them back to life. You reach over, careful not to jostle the room's quiet stillness, and coax the dying fire, blowing gently until the flames begin to lick upward once more. Outside, the village stirs slowly into wakefulness. Through the narrow window, you hear the low murmur of the mill wheel turning, its steady creak a constant in this sleepy dawn. Wooden carts rattle softly on the uneven cobblestones as they begin their morning journey, the wheels clattering like an ancient rhythm marking the day's start. Somewhere nearby, a bleat rises from the sheep pens, their woolly charges restless with the promise of fresh grass and chilly air. Life here is a slow, steady cycle: work, rest, and waiting. You know the pattern intimately: planting, harvesting, mending worn tools and clothes, and forever hoping the weather won't betray you. A harsh winter or a dry summer could mean ruin. You stand and stretch, feeling the familiar ache settle in your knees and shoulders, a dull throb that never quite leaves. It's a constant companion, one born from years of hard labor and rough living. Your hands, cracked and calloused, bear the stories of many days spent weaving coarse wool into cloth, chopping wood for the fire, and hauling water from the well. Each scar and nick whispers of past struggles and quiet perseverance. Despite the physical toll, there is a quiet dignity in these small, repeated tasks, the kind of pride that swells beneath the skin even when the body protests. Wrapped in your rough homespun tunic, you step outside into the cool morning air. The village is still cloaked in a thin mist, softening edges and muffling sounds. You make your way to the communal well, where a small cluster of neighbors has already gathered, wrapped in woolen shawls and leather boots. The well is a lifeline for the village. It's cold, clear water precious and hard-earned. Fetching water is no simple chore. Sometimes the wooden bucket splinters unexpectedly, forcing a delicate dance to keep the precious liquid from spilling. Other times, the well itself seems to grumble, as if weary of its endless duty beneath the earth, reluctant to give freely. You lower the bucket with care, the rope creaking in protest, and haul it up filled to the brim, the cold water glistening like liquid glass. As you exchange quiet greetings, the talk inevitably turns to the recent rumors: wolves prowling closer to the village borders than ever before. These rumors carry a weight heavier than the morning chill. You remember stories of wolf hunts, grim affairs, yes, but also rare moments when the village banded together, sharing purpose and courage. The memory feels distant and bittersweet. Wolves, these fierce and feared creatures, were once revered in the ancient Celtic tales whispered by your elders. Some clans still cling to talismans, simple charms of bone or iron, believed to ward off wolf attacks. These fragile tokens, passed down through generations, feel like delicate threads holding back a darker wilderness. The idea that a small piece of iron or a carved bone could keep such a formidable beast at bay is both comforting and a little wistful. Historians still argue whether these legends of wolves as evil spirits truly reflect real dangers faced by villagers or whether they were shaped more by human fears and superstitions, a way to explain the wildness beyond the known. Either way, the presence of these creatures is a constant reminder of the fine line between safety and danger. You part ways with the Well group and head back home, the sun climbing slowly and casting longer shadows across the village's narrow lanes. Your breakfast is modest, oat cakes, often dry and hard, but if you're lucky, softened by a drizzle of honey or a splash of fresh milk. You nibble slowly, savoring the simplicity. The food is plain but familiar, grounding you for the day ahead. As you eat, your mind drifts to the stories your grandfather once told you, tales of heroic battles, ancient kings, and the spirits of long-dead warriors said to still linger in the hills. These stories bring a strange comfort, like a warm cloak wrapped around a shivering soul. They remind you that while life is tough, it is also threaded with courage, honor, and a deep connection to the land. The day ahead promises more chores, mending fences, tending animals, gathering wood, and the constant, careful attention that survival here demands. There's a cautious hopefulness in the air, a silent prayer that the crops will grow, the weather will be kind, and the wolves will stay at bay. Despite the hardships, you find solace in the steady rhythm of village life. The endless cycle of work and rest, the small kindnesses shared among neighbors, the traditions passed from one generation to the next, all these form a fragile but enduring web that holds your world together. As the morning light grows stronger and the village fully awakens, you breathe deeply, steeling yourself for whatever the day may bring. In this place, warmth is hard-won, safety is never guaranteed, and life demands resilience. But there is also a strange beauty in that struggle, a quiet poetry in the perseverance of ordinary people living extraordinary lives. The sun climbs higher, but its warmth barely penetrates the thick stone walls of your cottage, keeping the chill of the morning stubbornly alive. Outside, the village stretches before you like a living map of smoke tendrils curling lazily from chimneys, a muted orchestra of sounds rising up to meet the day, the distant, rhythmic calls of market vendors hawking their wares, the gentle clop of hooves pressing through muddy paths, and the occasional bark of a dog chasing some forgotten scent. This small, rugged world hums quietly with life, and today, like a moth drawn to flame, you find yourself pulled toward its beating heart, the bustling marketplace. The marketplace is a patchwork of movement and sound, a delicate dance of barter, gossip, and survival. You step into the swirl of activity, your senses immediately flooded by the mingling scents of dried herbs, damp leather, and the faint, refreshing tang of river water carried on a cool breeze. Here, the people gather not just to exchange goods but to exchange stories, smiles, and sometimes the day's worries. Your fingers brush against rough-hewn pottery, bowls and jugs shaped by hands as calloused and worn as your own. There is a quiet comfort in knowing that each vessel carries a story. Maybe the potter who crafted this jug once traveled the ancient trade routes threading through Scotland's wild hills and misty glens, bringing clay from distant rivers or sharing techniques learned from far-off clans. Every item, Every stitch of worn leather in the satchels and belts you see is a testament to a life lived in constant touch with the earth and its many rhythms. Nearby, a trader animatedly recounts tales of distant clans, his voice carrying above the din. You catch fragments of his story, a curious custom involving brightly colored ribbons woven into women's hair, said to ward off evil spirits. The locals exchange amused looks, some scratching their heads, others chuckling quietly at the notion. It's a small, vivid reminder that even in the harshest lands, people long for beauty and meaning. They shape their lives with rituals and symbols, creating a patchwork of beliefs that bind them to their ancestors and to one another. You think about how such traditions, however odd they may seem, carry a gentle hope, an invisible shield against the uncertainties lurking beyond the village's borders. You wander closer to a stall where the air is thick with the sweet, heady aroma of spiced mead. The seller, a stout, bearded man with a wink, offers you a cautious sip from a carved wooden cup. The liquid is warm and golden, honeyed and infused with herbs like heather and juniper. He tells you that mead is a rare luxury, once reserved for kings and lairds during grand feasts. You can almost see the flicker of candlelight in a great hall, the clink of goblets raised high as lords and ladies share tales of conquest, alliances, and cunning over long, laughter-filled nights. Historians still argue whether these royal banquets were truly as lavish as the stories suggest or softened by the sheen of later romanticism. Were those halls filled with endless courses and endless wine, or were they more modest gatherings, whispered down the centuries until they grew into legends? You decide it doesn't really matter. For now, the warm sweetness of the mead is enough to carry you briefly away from the damp chill and hard edges of everyday life. As you meander further, your gaze catches a small boy sitting cross-legged by a basket brimming with glass marbles, shiny, fragile treasures that catch the light in a way that seems almost magical. He's carefully trading one marble for a handful of nuts with a friend, his face lit by a rare, fleeting smile. It's the kind of innocent joy that feels like a tiny rebellion against the relentless hardships surrounding you both. You remember how, long ago, children's games and small moments like this kept spirits alive even when the world seemed bent on wearing them down. The afternoon sun begins its slow descent, softening the edges of the village in a warm, amber glow. You make your way home, the worn paths familiar beneath your feet. In your arms, you carry the weight of the day's struggles, the constant effort to scrape enough food from the earth, to mend a worn garment, to keep the hearth fire burning bright. Yet, alongside that burden, there is also the subtle, unseen thread of connection woven through the marketplace, the quiet smiles, the shared stories, the communal resilience that makes this difficult life a little more bearable. You think of the way the market pulsed with life, how it brought together the world in miniature, a meeting place where the wild edges of the Scottish landscape met human hopes and traditions. Here, life's harshness was softened just enough by the simple acts of exchange, trust, and occasional laughter. As you near your cottage, the evening breeze carries with it the scent of wood smoke and damp earth, a reminder that even when the sun sets on this rugged land, life will begin anew come morning. And tomorrow, you'll return to this same dance, this same market square, ready to trade, to listen, to live. Evening settles slowly over the village, its arrival almost imperceptible at first. The sun slips behind the distant hills, painting the sky with a soft wash of pinks and purples that fade gradually into deepening blues. The light dims, and with it comes a hush, a gentle quiet that drapes over the cottages, fields, and narrow dirt paths like a familiar, well-worn blanket. You find yourself once again beside the hearth, that small, vital heart of your home, where the flickering flames send warm, trembling shadows dancing across the rough stone walls. The air holds the faint, earthy scent of smoke and burnt peat, mingling with the subtle chill creeping in from the outside world. It's a smell that feels both soothing and grounding, a reminder that while the day's labors have ended, life continues quietly here in this small, untamed corner of medieval Scotland. Your fingers move almost automatically, picking up the needle and thread to mend the worn edges of a threadbare cloak. The fabric is coarse and faded, patched once before, and now asking for your care again. The rhythmic movement of the needle pulling the thread through the heavy wool creates a soft, steady beat, a tiny ritual that anchors you in this moment, in the slow unfolding of the evening. There are no distractions here, no lanterns glowing from distant windows, no murmurs of distant conversations, no crackling of electric wires. Just the deepening dark, the steady crackle of the fire, and the comforting solidity of the stones beneath your hands. In this absence of modern noise, the darkness itself seems to take on a different character. It is no longer something to be feared, but a quiet companion, an enveloping presence that invites you to slow your thoughts and listen. You hear the faint, distant howl of a lone wolf somewhere beyond the woods, a haunting sound that feels ancient and wild. Leaves rustle in the gentle evening breeze, their dry crackling adding a whispered rhythm to the night song. Occasionally, there's the faint clatter of a tool dropped or a shutter closing at the neighboring farmstead. These small sounds weave together into a tapestry of life that feels both fragile, because it's so easily disturbed, and enduring, because it has repeated in this place for countless generations. Your mind drifts to the old stories about how villagers protected themselves against the unknown forces of the night. It was common, you recall, for people to hang bundles of herbs, thyme, rosemary, lavender, and even garlic by their doors and windows. These herbs served not only to freshen the air but also to guard against evil spirits, bad luck, or simply the unease that darkness can bring. The scents were said to keep misfortune at bay, a kind of gentle, natural magic woven into daily life. It's curious how these small customs offered comfort, a way to tame the mystery and quiet the worries that come with nightfall. Historians still argue whether these rituals had any genuine protective power or whether their true value lay in the psychological reassurance they provided. Perhaps, in times when so much was uncertain and out of one's control, these traditions helped people feel safer by giving them a small measure of agency. The scent of herbs, the familiar routine of hanging them, might have been as important as any supposed mystical effect. Your thoughts wander to the village healer, a figure wrapped in both reverence and a touch of quiet fear. She lives just beyond the woodpile, in a small cottage fragrant with dried herbs and smoke. She is known as the keeper of ancient knowledge, of plants, potions, and remedies passed down through generations of women who learned from their mothers and grandmothers. Her hands are steady, her voice soft but certain. Villagers come to her not only for cures but also for advice and comfort. Some whisper that her potions can work wonders, healing wounds or easing fevers where the simple care of time and rest would fail. Others, perhaps more skeptical, wonder if it is not the herbs themselves but the power of belief, the trust that something is being done that helps the sick to get better. You remember a particular story about the healer that has circulated for years. One winter, a neighbor brought her young child to the cottage, the child burning with fever and barely able to speak. The healer brewed a mixture of herbs, applying poultices and offering warm tea made from thyme and chamomile. Over several days, the child's fever slowly broke, and color returned to pale cheeks. Whether it was the herbs, the healer's care, or simply the child's natural resilience, no one can say for sure, but the outcome was a cause for quiet celebration. This blend of practical knowledge, folklore, and hope was a lifeline in a world where doctors were far away and sickness was often a lonely fight. As the fire in your hearth dwindles to glowing embers, you finish your mending and carefully fold the cloak. You tuck yourself under a thick woolen blanket, the chill now fully settled in the room but held at bay by layers of fabric and the last warmth of the fire. The slow rhythm of medieval life, the steady work, the whispered stories, the quiet fears and small hopes, wraps around you like the very cloak you just repaired. It is a comforting weight, familiar and enduring. Outside, the night stretches wide and still, deepening into a velvet black that seems to hold the whole world in its gentle embrace. The stars begin to shimmer faintly, tiny points of light piercing the darkness, timeless watchers of this place and its people. Somewhere, a night bird calls softly, its song a lullaby to the quiet hills. You close your eyes, feeling the slow pulse of the village life ebb and flow around you. The day is done. The mended cloak is ready for tomorrow's challenges. And here, in the fading warmth and growing stillness, you find a rare moment of peace, an ancient calm that has soothed souls for centuries. You breathe deeply, letting the night hold you gently as you drift towards sleep, wrapped in the soft cloak of history. The dawn breaks gray and misty, the kind of morning where the chill feels like it seeps straight into your bones, and the soft dampness hangs heavy in the air. You step outside, pulling your cloak tighter against the sharpness, boots sinking slightly into the dew-soaked earth. The fields stretch ahead, shrouded in a gentle fog that blurs the horizon, making the world look as if it's still half asleep, reluctant to fully wake. As you walk, the smell of wet grass and damp earth rises around you, a sense so deeply rooted in this land it almost feels like an old friend, familiar and constant even through the harshest seasons. The cold dew clings stubbornly to the blades of grass, soaking your boots and leaving faint impressions with each step. The village is slowly stirring. Neighbors already move toward the communal fields where the day's labor begins. Medieval agriculture in Scotland is a slow, steady pulse beneath the surface of daily life. The rhythm is old and steady, sowing seeds, tending crops, praying for the mercy of the weather. Barley and oats dominate these fields, hardy grains that can withstand the chill and provide a staple for families through long winters. But every year, there's an unspoken worry, a risk that the crop might fail, that the rains might not come, or that frost might steal the promise from young shoots. Your hands grip simple, well-worn tools, a wooden plow with iron fittings, a sickle with a curved blade forged by the village blacksmith. These tools are crude by modern standards but represent centuries of accumulated knowledge, the silent wisdom passed down from one generation to the next. Each scrape of the plow through the earth, each stroke of the sickle cutting grain, is a testament to human resilience in the face of relentless hardship. The work is relentless and exhausting. Hours stretch like the fields themselves, long and unyielding. But there's a certain satisfaction in feeling the earth beneath your fingers, soft and warm in places, stubborn and cold in others. The soil, when treated with care, can be generous, offering nourishment in return for your effort. It's a simple contract between you and the land, fragile but vital. You overhear the farmers talking quietly among themselves, voices low but tinged with concern. This year, the weather has been strange, cold snaps arriving just when the crops needed warmth, or sudden storms that flattened the fields in a single night. The stories mix with old superstitions, wondering if the gods themselves have turned their backs, or if fate has spun an unkind thread. Historians still debate whether medieval Scots truly believed their weather was controlled by divine forces, or if these beliefs were a way to make sense of the unpredictable, early attempts at what might be called proto-science. There's a murmur about rituals some clans still observe at the start of planting season. These ancient customs, offering barley cakes baked in communal ovens or pouring small libations of mead onto the earth, blend hope and tradition. You imagine these quiet ceremonies, the flicker of candlelight in stone chapels or by hearth fires, voices murmuring prayers to coax fertility from the soil. These acts give a rhythm to the otherwise harsh and uncertain realities, a soothing human response to forces beyond control. The sun begins to break through the gray clouds, casting a pale gold light that filters softly through the mist. Just then, a blacksmith arrives at the edge of the field, his strong hands expertly shaping a new plowshare. The steady ringing of his hammer becomes a comforting soundtrack, a reminder of renewal and craftsmanship. Sparks fly in tiny bursts, briefly illuminating the mist as if to chase away the morning gloom. His work is essential. Without a good plowshare, the soil remains stubborn and unyielding. The tools he forges are the difference between hope and hardship, between a bountiful harvest and lean times. Later in the morning, you find a moment to rest beside a small, babbling stream that cuts through the fields. The water is icy cold, fresh from the hills, and you cup it in your hands, letting it soothe your face and hands. The sound of the water flowing over smooth stones is gentle and steady, a brief reprieve from the demands of survival. Here, in this quiet spot, the struggle of daily life seems to pause. You take in the soft sunlight filtering through thinning clouds, the gentle rustle of leaves, the distant calls of birds that have made this landscape their home long before you. It's in moments like these, a pause between toil and rest, that the day's burdens seem lighter, if only for a little while. Shared effort, simple rituals, and the natural beauty of the land thread through a tough life, weaving moments of peace and connection. Even with the struggle so constant and the future uncertain, these small comforts, the feel of cool water, the ring of the blacksmith's hammer, the scent of damp earth, anchor you. They are reminders that, despite everything, life endures. And so you rise again, ready to meet the next task, carrying with you the quiet strength drawn from the land and those who have tended it long before you. The afternoon sun has softened, casting a golden hue over the village, when you find yourself wandering toward the steady rhythm of hammer strikes echoing through the cool air. It draws you like a heartbeat pulsing through the day, steady and unyielding, guiding your footsteps toward the village smithy. There, a broad-shouldered man works methodically, his hands streaked with soot and sweat, the glow from the forge reflecting in his sharp eyes as he shapes glowing iron into the tools and weapons the village depends on. The smithy is a place apart from the usual bustle, part workshop, part hearthside sanctuary. The air is thick with the heat of burning coal, waves of warmth washing over you in sharp contrast to the cool breeze outside. The metallic clang of hammer on anvil beats out a slow, relentless rhythm, punctuated only by the occasional hiss as the red-hot iron meets water. The scent of burnt coal mingles with leather and the sharp tang of hot metal, creating an atmosphere that feels as old and enduring as the land itself. Watching the smith work is to witness transformation, raw, rough iron yielding to precise, purposeful forms. Horseshoes to protect tired hooves, blades sharp enough to cut through the cold mist of a highland morning, and tools that turn the wheels of everyday survival. Each strike carries intention. It's slow, deliberate, almost meditative. This is the backbone of the village, where practical need meets a kind of artistry that's as vital as the soil beneath your feet. You hear whispered stories from nearby villagers, tales of smiths not just as craftsmen, but as keepers of secret knowledge, almost like sorcerers. Their ability to coax strength from cold metal borders on the magical in the eyes of many. Some say that the rhythm of the hammer must follow certain patterns, that each strike is part of an unseen ritual. If the rhythm is off, the tool might fail, or worse, bring bad luck. The smith's work is not just physical but spiritual, woven with superstition and hope. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were widespread across Scotland or unique to certain clans and regions, but the stories persist, passed down in hushed tones beside fires long after the anvils have cooled. You imagine a smith pausing mid-strike, counting in his head, the hammer tapping out a secret code to fortify the iron with luck as much as with strength. One story in particular catches your attention. A tale of a smith who forged a horseshoe backward on purpose. This was no accident but a deliberate act to bring good fortune to warriors heading into battle. The reversed shoe was said to confuse evil spirits or bring luck to the rider, a charm against misfortune. Whether the magic worked or not remains lost to time, but the story clings to the village's collective memory, a testament to the mingling of belief and craft in this harsh world. Nearby, children play with scraps of discarded metal, their laughter a soft counterpoint to the harsh clang of the forge. They swing the scraps as if they were swords, their small faces alight with imagination and innocence. In this world shaped by struggle, their play is a fleeting escape, a reminder that even here, in the midst of iron and fire, life's softer edges persist. It strikes you how resilience weaves through the fabric of this time, found in both the smith's steady labor and the carefree joy of children's games. You watch as the smith wipes his brow with a leather rag, muscles rippling beneath soot-streaked sleeves. There is a quiet strength in this man's work, a resilience that carries the village through cold winters and uncertain days. Every horseshoe nailed in place, every blade sharpened, every tool forged is a small, mighty weapon against the daily hardships of medieval life. As you turn to leave, the hammer's rhythm fades behind you, a steady pulse beneath the village's slower, softer sounds. You carry with you a newfound respect for this quiet labor, this ancient craft that blends practical skill with whispered rituals and the weight of centuries. In the tough land of medieval Scotland, the smith's fire and hammer shaped not just iron, but the very survival of those who called it home. Night falls once more, folding the village in its deepening shadows. The sky, now a soft charcoal canvas, stretches endlessly overhead, dotted with stars that begin to twinkle faintly, silent sentinels keeping watch over the small cluster of homes below. You find your feet leading you toward the village chapel, a modest stone building that leans quietly into the darkening evening like an old friend settling into a well-worn chair. The chapel's walls, rough and weathered from years of rain and frost, hold the weight of countless whispered prayers and muffled hopes. Through the narrow, arched windows, you catch the flicker of candlelight spilling like warm honey onto the cool earth outside. These soft glows pulse gently, as if the building itself breathes in the calm rhythm of evening worship. The scent of beeswax candles mingles with the faint, ever-present aroma of damp stone, creating a quiet perfume that feels timeless, unchanging, a steady comfort in a world otherwise prone to sudden hardships. You step inside, your footsteps muffled on the uneven flagstones. The air here is thick with the smell of old wood and sacred incense, the atmosphere dense and peaceful, as if the very walls are holding their breath. Around you, familiar faces settle into the wooden pews, villagers weary from a day's toil, their heads bowed in quiet reverence, their eyes softened by candlelight. You slip into an empty spot and let the chapel's hush wash over you. The priest's voice rises slowly, weaving a gentle chant that ebbs and flows like a lullaby. His words, rich with the cadences of ancient Latin and Scots, seem to slow time itself, drawing the worries of the day into a soft pool of sound where they lose their sharp edges. You catch fragments of the prayers, the plea for protection, the thanks for harvests, the quiet confessions of fears no one dares to say aloud. Even if the meaning is not always fully clear, the tone carries an unspoken reassurance, a balm that soothes tired hearts. Medieval Scotland was a deeply religious place. Faith wasn't just a matter of Sunday worship, it wove through daily life like an invisible tether. For many, the chapel was as much a social hub as a spiritual refuge, where neighbors exchanged news, settled disputes, and reinforced community bonds. You can almost hear the whispered conversations between prayers, the chatter of local gossip, the subtle exchanges of support and advice that knit the village together. Yet, historians still argue about the nature of medieval faith. Was it always sincere devotion, or often more habit than heartfelt belief? Did villagers truly understand the doctrines preached by priests, or did they find comfort more in the rituals and community than in theology? The answers remain elusive, as faith in that era was a mosaic of personal feeling, social expectation, and cultural tradition, varying wildly even within a single village. You recall the stories of local saints whose lives blurred the lines between miracle and myth. Saint Columba, in particular, stands out, an enigmatic figure whose legend is embroidered with tales of calming wild storms and banishing restless spirits from remote Scottish isles. These stories, passed down through generations, offered a soft light in the darkness, a way to explain and endure the chaos that so often seemed to surround everyday life. They were narratives not just of divine intervention but of hope, a sense that unseen forces cared deeply for those who struggled. Outside the chapel, the wind rustles the bare branches of skeletal trees, their limbs scratching faint patterns against the night sky. The sound is delicate, like nature's own quiet breathing, reminding you that the cycles of life and death, growth and decay, continue beyond human worries and prayers. The rhythm of seasons and stars flows on, indifferent to the fleeting troubles of mortals. In this moment, you feel the fragile balance that medieval Scots lived with daily, the tension between fear and hope, between holding fast to tradition and adapting to change. It's a delicate dance, played out quietly beneath the surface of every conversation, every prayer, every shared glance in the flickering candlelight. As the service draws to a close, the priest's final blessing lingers softly in the chapel's stillness. You rise, joining the others who file out into the cooling night air. The stars overhead have grown brighter now, delicate and distant, like tiny candles scattered across a velvet blanket. The village sleeps beneath their watchful gaze, cradled by the hills and valleys that have sheltered countless generations before you. Wrapped in the gentle embrace of ancient faith and quiet community, you feel a subtle peace settling in your chest. Though life here is often harsh and unpredictable, this moment, a communion of light and shadow, breath and prayer, offers a quiet refuge. The chapel doors close behind you with a soft thud, and the night folds you into its calm arms as you trudge homeward, ready at last to drift toward rest. The chill of early morning slips quietly through the cracks in your modest stone home, nudging you awake before the sun even dares peek over the horizon. You stir beneath your thin woolen blanket, the air crisp and biting against your skin. Outside, the low moans of a waking village mingle with the soft bleating of sheep and the occasional cough of a distant cow. The day begins not with ease or luxury but with the pressing, unavoidable necessity of tending to the animals, the heart and soul of your livelihood. You pull on your rough-spun clothes, feeling the familiar scratch of wool and linen against your skin. Stepping outside, you're greeted by the damp earth and the faint scent of peat smoke hanging low in the morning air. The barn stands sturdily nearby, simple, weathered, and built from thick oak timbers, meant to shield your livestock from Scotland's unpredictable and often harsh weather. Rain, wind, frost, it all seems to test the walls, but they endure, much like you. Sheep are the mainstay here. Their soft, dense wool prized not just for the warmth it brings in biting winters, but also as a vital economic resource. You hear the gentle shuffle of hooves and the soft rustling of wool as the flock moves restlessly. Their bleats rise and fall in a soothing rhythm, a natural soundtrack to your morning chores. Feeding the animals is a careful process. You toss handfuls of hay into the troughs, mindful not to waste a single strand. The cattle, lumbering and steady, gaze at you with calm eyes, awaiting their morning meal of oats and hay. Goats, smaller and nimbler, dart around the enclosure, their sharp hooves clicking on the stone as they scramble for the freshest bites. Their stubborn, curious nature often brings a faint smile to your face, even when they sneak through the fence to nibble on your precious herbs. You remember the stories your elders told you about shepherds long ago who used simple whistles and distinct calls to guide their flocks. It's a skill passed down through generations, a language of its own that can herd dozens of sheep without a single shout. Some say the calls mimic the sheep's natural bleats, while others insist they carry a musical quality, soothing the animals as much as directing them. It's a dance between human and beast, subtle and patient. Sheep's wool is more than just practical warmth. It's a lifeline for the village economy. After shearing, the fleece is cleaned and spun into yarn by deft hands, then woven into cloth that travels far beyond the village borders, sometimes as far as bustling market towns or even coastal ports. You imagine merchants bargaining over bolts of thick woolen fabric, unaware of the cold fingers and early mornings behind its making. Historians still argue exactly how much medieval Scottish communities relied on wool trade compared to subsistence farming and barter systems. Some believe that remote villages like yours were almost entirely self-sufficient, exchanging goods locally and rarely venturing beyond the hills. Others argue that even the most isolated communities maintained a delicate balance of trade, with wool and livestock as their primary currency in a world before standardized money. There's a peculiar charm in the old customs tied to animal care. You hang sprigs of herbs like rosemary and thyme in the stalls, not only to freshen the air but to ward off disease or perhaps, as some elders whisper, to keep evil spirits at bay. Folk wisdom and superstition mingle freely here, blurring the lines between practical knowledge and quiet magic. You half expect that a misplaced herb or an unlucky gesture could invite misfortune, but mostly it offers comfort, a ritual that turns mundane chores into something a little more meaningful. The animals themselves offer a gentle warmth amid the chill. As you reach out to stroke a sheep's thick fleece, the softness contrasts with the cold stone beneath your feet. The steady, repetitive sounds, the low humming of the cattle, the rhythmic bleating, the rustle of straw, create a soothing atmosphere. There's a quiet companionship in this, a simple connection that steadies your breath even when the world outside feels uncertain and precarious. By mid-morning, the sun breaks through the patchy clouds, scattering drops of dew from the grass and turning the earth glistening with a soft golden light. The chill retreats slowly, replaced by a fresh warmth that fills your lungs and loosens the stiffness in your muscles. You pause to breathe deeply, the clean, earthy scent of the countryside filling your senses. For a fleeting moment, the weight of the world feels lighter, carried away by the promise of a new day and the steady rhythm of life unfolding. You watch as the sheep amble toward the pasture, their silhouettes moving lazily against the brightening sky. Nearby, a herder's dog waits patiently, ears perked and eyes alert, ready to guide the flock with practiced ease. The quiet companionship between dog, human, and sheep seems like an age-old symphony, a natural order that has played out here for centuries. Historians still debate how much medieval herders relied on their dogs for actual work versus human skill and whistles, but it's clear that these partnerships were vital in navigating the often rugged Scottish terrain. The hills and valleys are as much a challenge as they are a home, demanding constant vigilance and care. As the day unfolds, you're reminded that these animal chores, repetitive as they may seem, are anything but trivial. They form the backbone of survival, a continuous cycle of care and labor that sustains not just you but the entire village. In the rough wool and warm breath of the livestock, in the steady call of shepherds and the sharp eyes of herding dogs, there's a quiet, stubborn resilience, a life lived not in comfort but in harmony with the land's demands. And so, with the sun climbing higher and the animals settled for now, you carry the day's tasks forward, steady and unhurried, feeling the slow pulse of a world both brutal and strangely beautiful. Later in the afternoon, you find yourself drifting toward the village's modest communal oven, a humble stone structure tucked near the edge of the cluster of homes. The oven's weathered stones are covered in soft moss, mottled with patches of lichen that hint at countless years of use. The air around it is heavy with the comforting warmth of freshly baked bread, a gentle mix of toasted barley and earthy rye scents curling lazily upward and inviting you closer, like an old friend offering a quiet welcome after a long day. This oven is more than just a place to bake. It is the heart of the village's sustenance and community spirit. Villagers bring their dough here once or twice a week, a simple but essential ritual in a world where food is often hard-earned and never taken for granted. You notice how the oven's thick stone walls retain heat for hours, glowing faintly as if holding the village's warmth inside their grasp. The baker tending the fire is a woman with flour-dusted hands and a calm, knowing smile. She moves with a steady rhythm, sliding round loaves into the oven's fiery belly with practiced ease. Her eyes crinkle slightly when she speaks, though her words are soft, spoken in the local brogue, rich with history and quiet pride. As you watch, other villagers gather nearby, some waiting their turn, others swapping stories or jokes to pass the time. The slow baking process encourages conversation, connection, and a shared patience that contrasts the harshness of life outside the village walls. Bread here isn't the fluffy, white wonder you might imagine from a modern bakery. It's dense, coarse, and hearty, made primarily from barley, oats, and rye grains that grow robustly in Scotland's cooler climate. Occasionally, dried peas or ground beans are mixed in to stretch the dough further, a practical choice born from necessity rather than taste. Meat is a rare luxury, so this bread provides the daily fuel that keeps the village moving. It's filling, sustaining, and a quiet testament to survival. You think about how historians still debate the prevalence of sourdough starters in medieval Scotland. Some argue that wild yeasts were captured more by accident than by design, a happy outcome of nature's whim rather than a deliberate craft. It's fascinating to imagine this slow, natural leavening process, an ancient dance between human hands and wild microbes that allowed bread to rise without the modern comforts of commercial yeast. The baking routine also carries an unexpected touch of tradition and folklore. You recall a curious practice where leftover bread, instead of being wasted, was carefully broken into small pieces and fed to animals, helping them through the lean months. Even more intriguing are the folk remedies: bread rubbed on wounds, mixed with herbs to soothe aches, or used as a base for poultices. These uses speak to a resourcefulness shaped by necessity and a belief in the gentle healing powers hidden in the everyday. It's a quiet reminder that in this rugged land, nothing is truly wasted. Every crumb, every morsel has its place. As the baker pulls the golden brown loaf from the oven, the crust crackles softly, and a gentle steam rises in thin wisps. You imagine the satisfying sound of breaking this bread later, sharing it with neighbors or family, each bite carrying not just flavor but the effort and care of many hands. This simple act of breaking bread is an unspoken bond, an affirmation of community and shared endurance amid the relentless challenges of medieval life. The warmth from the oven seeps into your skin as the day's light fades, replaced by a cool, creeping twilight. The village begins to quiet down, preparing for the night's rest, wrapped in the comfort of routine and cooperation. The bread, dense and nourishing, promises a steady supply of strength for tomorrow's work. In these moments, there is a fragile peace, a stillness born of shared labor and the humble victories of survival. You feel a deep appreciation for these daily rhythms, the slow patience, the shared stories, and the simple yet profound pleasure of warm bread. It's a reminder that even in a world often described as brutal or harsh, there are pockets of gentleness and connection that sustain the spirit. The communal oven stands as a beacon of that enduring human need to gather, to share, and to nurture one another. As night fully settles and the stars begin to prick the sky, the village nestles into silence. The oven cools slowly, its stones retaining the day's warmth like a quiet secret. You breathe in the faint scent of barley and rye, mingling with the crisp night air, and you carry with you the steady comfort of a world where, for all its challenges, bread remains a symbol of life, resilience, and hope. As dusk stretches its soft, dusky fingers over the village, you find yourself wandering toward the small, murky river that snakes quietly at the edge of town. The sky is painted in muted purples and grays, the kind of evening light that softens the hard edges of the day and beckons you toward the slow rituals that mark the turning of time. Here, by the riverbank, the daily washing is underway, a gentle, communal ceremony that unfolds at the end of every long day. The water is cold, sharper than you expected, slipping past your fingers like tiny shards of ice. It bites lightly, a stark contrast to the warm, golden glow fading in the sky above. You watch as villagers lean over smooth, flat stones embedded in the riverbank, rhythmically scrubbing coarse, woolen garments and rough linen cloth. Their motions are steady, almost hypnotic, as if the repeated strokes could scrub away not just dirt, but the weariness that clings to each soul after a hard day. There's a certain peacefulness here amid the daily grind, a moment of quiet focus that feels almost sacred. This simple task, so distant from the whirl and hum of modern washing machines, is deeply human. It's slow, methodical, and oddly calming. The rhythmic splashing and soft murmur of voices create a gentle backdrop to the fading light, inviting you to breathe slower, sink deeper into the present. The clothes themselves are humble, yet essential. Made from coarse wool spun by the villagers' own hands or rough linen harvested and woven in nearby fields, these garments are dyed in muted earth tones, soft browns, faded greens, and gentle grays that blend seamlessly with the rugged Scottish landscape. The colors speak of utility and endurance more than fashion. These are clothes made for work, for weathering the cold, and for lasting through seasons of relentless toil. Keeping these clothes clean is about more than hygiene. In this world, where every thread counts, cleanliness is a matter of social standing, a subtle marker of respectability and order. But what clean truly means is shaped by survival rather than luxury. A garment might never be spotless by modern standards, but it must be clean enough to carry you through the next day without shame or discomfort. You notice the hands of the washers, rough, scarred, and calloused from years of labor. Their skin tells stories of endless toil, from tending sheep on rocky hillsides to wielding tools in damp, chilly workshops. Yet, despite the visible hardships, there is a quiet dignity in the way their fingers move, carefully, deliberately, with practiced familiarity. Every scrub and rinse is an act of care and resilience, a tiny rebellion against the relentlessness of rural medieval life. Historians still debate exactly how often medieval Scots washed their clothes. Some argue that full bathing was a rare luxury, perhaps reserved for special occasions, while regular washing of garments might have been less frequent but supplemented by airing clothes out in the wind and sun. There's even speculation that in colder months, when water was scarce or frozen, people relied heavily on such airing rituals to keep their clothes from becoming unbearable. One of the more charming and curious facts you recall is that medieval Scots sometimes used nettles in their laundry. These prickly plants, often considered weeds, had practical uses. Rinsing clothes with nettle-infused water could brighten dull fabric and even repel insects. It's a small, natural touch that connects the domestic rhythms of the village to the wild, untamed landscape beyond the riverbank. The everyday and the natural world intertwine in this simple laundry ritual. As you dip a coarse wool shirt into the rushing water, you watch the once clear river water turn faintly brown from the grime and soot washed away by your efforts. It's a visual reminder of the endless cycles of dirt and clean, of work and rest, of struggle and renewal. These cycles are echoed in every corner of village life: the planting and harvesting of crops, the waxing and waning of daylight, the birth and passing of generations. Washing clothes is more than a chore. It's a grounding ritual that knits the community together, weaving individual lives into a shared tapestry of endurance and care. The soft gurgle of the river, the fading chirp of distant birds, and the gentle slap of water against stone create a quiet soundtrack as you pause and lift your eyes toward the twilight sky. The first stars begin to shimmer, tiny pinpricks of calm in the darkening blue, flickering patiently above the hills and fields. Their distant light feels steady and eternal, a quiet contrast to the fleeting struggles of the day. A soft fatigue settles over you, the kind that comes from a day full of hard, honest work and the unspoken endurance that fills every moment. It's the weariness of body and spirit tempered by a sense of belonging, of participating in something bigger and older than yourself. The cycle will begin again at dawn, but for now, here at the river's edge, there is peace. You think about how these small, simple tasks have echoed through centuries, unchanging in their necessity. And though the world beyond the village will shift and grow in complexity, these quiet rituals remain, reminders of resilience, connection, and the humble grace of life lived close to the earth. As the stars multiply overhead and the chill of night deepens, you feel a gentle stillness creeping in. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and prepare to leave the riverbank, carrying with you the quiet comfort of this ordinary, enduring moment. The day's struggles will soon be behind you, replaced by the slow, restful promise of night. Night deepens around the village, folding the world into shadows and quiet. You step inside your humble home, feeling the chill of the evening air linger just behind you as the door creaks softly closed. The faint scent of smoke and peat fills the room, mixing with the faint tang of last night's stew, lingering like a memory in the air. You settle yourself near the flickering hearth fire, the heart of your home and your daily life. The flames dance gently, casting warm, golden shadows on the rough, uneven stone walls. Each flicker seems to breathe life into the room, a soft, moving light that chases away the day's darkness. The crackling of burning wood creates a steady, soothing sound, like a heartbeat, gentle and reassuring. It's the kind of background noise that lulls you slowly, coaxing your body to relax and your mind to let go of the day's labors. You feel the weariness of the day seep into your bones, settling as a deep, steady weight. Your muscles, tight and stiff from tending fields, chasing sheep and hauling water, begin to unwind. The small comforts of this hearth, the warmth, the light, the steady presence of the fire, wrap around you like a well-worn cloak. As you breathe in the warmth, your thoughts drift. You reflect on the odd, sometimes harsh realities of life in medieval Scotland. The relentless cold, the thin food, the long days of hard work. Yet beneath the surface of these challenges, there's a quiet resilience. Your ancestors spent many nights just like this, huddled around fires, sharing stories, worries, and hopes, finding moments of community in a world that was often difficult and unpredictable. Historians still argue whether medieval Scots found more solace in communal gatherings around the fire or in solitary reflection after the day's end, but what feels clear to you is that the daily rhythms, the slow tending of sheep, the careful baking of bread, the simple washing of clothes in cold rivers, formed a steady, if tough, flow that grounded life itself. You remember some of the more peculiar customs of this time, like the herbal rinses used in laundry, where people would dip their clothes in water infused with nettles or herbs, believing these natural scents helped freshen fabric and ward off pests. Or the sheep whistles you heard echoing softly through the hills, a strangely melodic way to call animals home, as much a part of the landscape as the rolling mist or the cold wind. There's also that odd belief you've heard whispered from elders, that a broken loaf of bread, when rubbed on a wound, might soothe pain or help it heal faster. It sounds strange to you now, mixing food and medicine in ways that modern minds might question, but in a world where nothing went to waste and every resource had multiple purposes, it makes a quiet kind of sense. These small, everyday details weave a rich tapestry of human experience, parts strange and parts familiar, that connect you not just to your ancestors, but to the land and the long, slow story it holds. As the fire's warmth begins to fade and the quiet settles deeper into the room, you feel your breath slow, muscles relax fully, and your mind gently drift toward rest. You are part of something vast and slow, a whisper of history carried softly through time, cradling you as sleep begins to wrap its gentle arms around you. The fire's glow dims further, and the night grows still. The weight of a hard day slips away like smoke drifting through an open window, carried softly on the night breeze. Let the slow pulse of history soothe you now, the soft echo of lives once lived, the quiet strength that time cannot erase. As you breathe in calm and exhale tension, picture the peaceful Scottish hills stretching beyond your window, cloaked in soft mist and mystery, inviting you into dreams as deep and timeless as the land itself. Good night, and may the gentle stories of the past carry you softly into sleep.